All right, welcome back to the In My Beach Boys Room podcast. I am Adam Schreiner. I'm here with Matthew Hartz, and today we are getting into 1976.
Yes, we are.
And we're going to talk about 15 big ones. I did my homework, as I was told to do by my teacher, my Beach Boys teacher here, Matthew Hartz. He has been teaching me about the Beach Boys for 15 years now. Well, 15 years of their career. So I'm becoming quite educated on the Beach Boys here. It's kind of crazy that we're already at 76. I feel like we've lived lifetime since we started this thing.
Yep, definitely.
So let's get into our social media stuff. We have mainly Facebook is probably where we're most active. We do put some videos up on Instagram, but Facebook, if you just look up Matthew Hartz, he is holding a banjo as a young child.
And actually that picture is right from late 1976. That's what
cool.
That's what I was doing when all this was going on.
So your Facebook profile picture is actually
it's
from this year?
It's from 1976. It's from
cool.
late that year, and it's me playing the banjo and my brother John's playing the tambourine, and in the caption in the photo album it says Matt and John performing Little Deuce Coupe.
Very cool. Okay,
Yeah.
Hey, even more reason to go find us on Facebook. So then we have Instagram, which is just Matthew Hartz Music, Twitter, Matthew_Hartz, and then YouTube, obviously, we have a ton of videos on there. We record all these podcasts, and then the covers that Matthew does, we also do a video recording on those. He also has some fiddle tunes on there, and we're going to continue to put the, Beach Boys covers and fiddle tunes all up on the YouTube. So subscribe, do all those things that help us out. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the listeners and all the new listeners that are coming in and giving us this great feedback. It really does mean a lot to us when you let us know that you are enjoying what we're doing here. So with that being said, let's do our normal format here and give me some history. We'll get into the album and then we'll go from there.
Well, like we did on the last episode, we gotta let's catch them up to a little bit the end of 75, and that would be the significant thing that happened at the end of 75 is Dr. Landy.
Right.
Brian's therapist got hired, and I also 74 and 75. That last episode that we did, we talked about all the important compilations, and one that I forgot to mention, it was in the notes, so just didn't have it, is this Warner Brothers, because of Endless Summer and Spirit of America doing so. They put out this compilation called Good Vibrations, and it's, the post Pet Sounds material, but It went to number 25 at the end of the year. So you start counting all the compilation albums that came out of the different labels and everything. It's pretty staggering. So I wanted to mention that.
Okay.
And the other thing, we already touched on it at the beginning, I got to thinking I need to talk about my Beach Boy perspective a little bit more in the early part of the 70s in the banjo thing.
As a kid at this time, right?
Because, when Carl and the Passions and Holland were coming out, were about the time I was discovering them, 3 or 4 years old. But I wasn't discovering those albums. I was discovering my mom's albums, Little Deuce Coupe, the concert album, and Summer Days and Summer Nights. Those are the only 3 albums I had. And so I was discovering their old stuff in 72 and 73 as a little kid. And so it wasn't, I was getting into them in 72 and 73, but not who the current Beach Boys
they were. Right. You were actually kind of in line with everybody else, essentially, right? With this resurgence of Endless Summer and all that.
There was a little bit more context just because I had been into them so much before the age even of 5, and so and my mom and dad had tried to fill in as much of the story as they could, because I had this undeniable interest that the whole family knew about with the Beach Boys at that very young age. All my cousins, and we'll get into that a little bit too, and how they fostered all that. But this was a heavy period of as we're going through the episodes, I can remember very, with a lot of detail, just really vivid in my mind, some of these things that went on, especially in 76. So anyway, just wanted to talk about that. This is when I'm getting into the Beach Boys, but my perspective is still skewed. I don't know the whole story.
I mean, especially since this podcast is kind of, it's based off of your infusion, with the Beach Boys as well. So it's good to kind of bring it back to that as well,
I figured the next few episodes too, they're sprinkled with my first Beach Boy concerts, in the late '70s. Things will get a little bit personal as we talk about what's going on with the Beach Boys and what happened in my Beach Boy world.
Well, and maybe for some of the new listeners, or maybe you're just started listening, Matthew Hartz, he is a fantastic musician and it has done a lot of really cool and accomplished a lot of things in the fiddle world. So, hearing his story kind of combined with his musical background is really cool. So if you haven't checked out some of the early episodes where he goes into, some of those things that he's done with his music career, that's kind of why the fusion of this is so interesting and so cool. So I just wanted to kind of bring it back to that a little bit as well.
In the podcast introduction, I mentioned something about we not wanting to make it very much about me, but every once, and then I realized how good of a job we've done of that, this whole thing, with not too much references to what I was doing, but it does become an interesting part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, definitely. And so now with all now we can get into 1976.
Okay. All right.
And Dr. Landy was brought in end of '75, so Brian's getting healthier. He is they got him eating healthier. They got him staying away from the drugs.
So even with Dr. Landy, mm-hmm. His method not being the way that most people would like someone to treat another human being, it was effective, right?
I don't know how much they knew about that early
at this time.
On. Yeah, because this wasn't the first period was not like that second period that everybody knows about,
right?
That everybody's
familiar. At the beginning,
it wasn't. This period that basically is just the end of '75 to the end of '76.
So at this point, Landy's doing good. He's doing good for Brian.
He is doing good in that he's getting him out of bed and he's getting him to be healthier, and there's at least some results happening.
Okay,
but I think that even at this time, people are starting to kind of like the methods they're kind of wondering about.
Gotcha. Okay.
With the monitoring all the phone calls, putting locks on the refrigerators,
right.
Just the control and even the way he would treat Brian when people would see him
just blatantly doing it.
Yeah. Just kind of treating Brian like a child and being really mean.
Totally.
It's witnessed by a lot of reporters and other people that wrote about it in the articles at the time, But he is getting healthier and exercising and slowing down on the smoking, and they got him away from drinking and cocaine and all the other good stuff, and they were excited to get started with a new album because of all of the interest that had been generated by Endless Summer, Spirit of America, and the other compilations and reissues that had come out. And it had been since Holland.
Since they've done a new one, right? Because they've been doing
for a new album.
Right.
They had that one single, Child of Winter, in '74, and they worked on some music during that period, but it was pretty sporadic and there wasn't much going on. But the appetite after those things had come out and done so well, the appetite for Where's Brian Wilson was pretty heavy. And so they start working on 15 Big Ones, get Brian in the studio. Dr. Landy's around all the time. And Brian starts working on a lot of oldies. And Carl and Dennis, right from the beginning, start to push back on this a little bit. Like, hey, we haven't done anything for a long time, and we don't know if this is the direction we want to go. And they took a little bit of a break after things started in January and had lots of meetings about what should happen. And
they're pushing back on I guess, like labels? Like, who are they? Where's the push?
They're pushing back on Mike. And the Beach Boys are starting to separate into two factions, and that's what I'm going to talk about with kind of the de-evolution of the Beach Boys at this point.
Okay.
Whereas the first part of their career, we talk about the amazing 4 years, 1962, from Surf and Safari to Pet Sounds, and how the musical growth was just amazing and staggering. And then you got the stuff after Pet Sounds that nobody basically listened to in its time, the late 60s albums, and then all the wonderful early 70s stuff.
My favorite.
You know, and you know, that stuff had not been paid much attention to, but it was an amazing progression of music all through that time. And then when everything from the early part of the career got so popular with these massively successful compilations and reissues, that they had to, the shows started becoming more weighted toward the oldies, so we started losing some of the new hip stuff. But even recording, they started to, in some ways, become a parody of themselves, because people wanted to hear the old Beach Boys or stuff that sounded more like them. And so I feel like this is a point where the Beach Boys definitely start to
There's like a
devolve.
A little divide, sort of.
Well, and you have Carl and Dennis. They called their faction the Partiers, which is overgeneralized. And then you had Mike and Al, who were pretty close at this time, and they had become meditation teachers, and they called them the Meditators.
Okay.
So you had, and then on the plane, on the group plane where they fly to gigs, there was actually a meditating section and the partiers section, and this is already
happening, or this is where we start to see it happen.
This is already starting to happen, where it's starting to divide into, and not only are these more the free living guys over here, Carl and Dennis, and these are the more responsible guys, Mike and Al or whatever, but Carl and Dennis represent the guys that want to keep the new music going and just keep creating. And Mike was absolutely thrilled with what happened with all that stuff with Endless Summer, and used it as an opportunity to really steer the band in that direction.
Sure.
His brother comes in as full-time manager, and so it's Carl and Dennis pushing back on Mike and Al a little bit, and Steve, who are wanting to come back with this, when Jim Garcia, who was part-time manager for the couple years before this, his term with them is finished in March, and then Steve Love becomes the full-time guy kind of for everything, and he instigates this Brian's Back campaign based on the whole thing that the public really wants to know where he is after all of the successes with the compilations. And they knew that it wasn't legit to begin with, but they knew that they could capitalize on it, you know? And so, hey, let's make a new album. Let's get Brian in to produce it, even though he hasn't had much to do with anything over the past few years. He's getting healthier with his doctor, but let's see if we can get him in there to do something. And so, 15 Big Ones was, the album where they were bringing him back as the producer.
Right, and this is kind of going back to the last episode where at the end where you're talking about, people seeing all this Brian Wilson
Mm-hmm.
on the thing, and so they're just using that as, kind of the catapult to bring him back, right?
Right, and a lot of those stories that were written in the couple years previous, even though Brian wasn't a part of the touring band or anything, the stories focused on him.
Right, yeah.
And so everybody, whether or not they were reading the album covers or watching the magazines or whatever like that, they were getting this, thing of where's Brian Wilson. And
right.
So then somebody, hey, let's turn it into here. Well, here he is.
Okay.
I like it.
And Brian was open to this?
Well, I don't even know if he knew too much about it to begin with, but I was reading a funny quote last night where somebody asked him, maybe a reporter from Britain, about the whole Brian's Back campaign, and he says, Brian's back? He said, I'm not sure where I've been.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that just, so
that's hilarious.
So he was playing along, but he wasn't fully back in and not ready to be fully back in, but they put him in charge, at least as far as the public was concerned,
sure.
Because wanted this to be a Brian Wilson produced album. But anyway, and then we have the single "Rock and Roll Music," the first single from the album.
First song on the record.
On record. It was done in, I think it got released in the end of May, and it goes to number 5. Now this is another Chuck Berry tune. This is not an original.
Oh, okay. And we'll talk about it when we get into the analysis. But I was wondering that. So
Mike had, I think, after the sessions for 15 Big Ones got going, I think in the middle of it, he took Brian. He goes, "Hey, we did pretty good with Surfing USA." And maybe it was after Surfing USA had been the hit. He said, "Let's do another Chuck Berry type thing," and so they got this together, and it went to number 5, which was their highest charting single since Good Vibrations.
Which from my perspective is crazy, because the amount of good music that goes on in between Good Vibrations and rock and roll music. It's wild.
Well, it doesn't make any sense, but much of the Beach Boys' career, they were successful because some things happened at the right time, and some other things did not happen at the right time. That whole period, Pet Sounds up to now, I'm just glad they made it through it and continued to, they could have, ceased to exist,
Well, and you want to talk about timing. There's potential here still with how they're releasing all these other box sets, and kind of like what you had said when we started this thing, and I've said along the way that, there's a lot of Beach Boys, amazing Beach Boys music, maybe some of their best Beach Boys music that hasn't even been discovered by the majority of people.
No.
And that's, that is, that kind of lines up with the timing. They could still, the Beach Boys organization can continue to still have success even well after, the Beach Boys are even around.
Right. Could in 100 years from now.
Yeah,
that's I really feel like the music is so good that people will still be, whoa, have you ever heard about this group from the 1900s called the Beach Boys?
Exactly.
Another thing, so Capitol EMI, they, so the British arm of Capitol, they released a single, Good Vibrations, backed up with Wouldn't It Be Nice at this time, because they had to get in on all the resurgence stuff, and it went to number 18 right around this time. So old music getting released and getting into the current charts, it's just crazy.
That is crazy. And maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Were other bands did this happen to any other bands where they would have a compilation that would or re-release it? Were other bands re-releasing like these, or did like any other bands see how successful the Beach Boys were and attempt to do it?
Well, everybody had done best of type things, and the Beach Boys had a lot, several best of albums come out before this, and yes, people did greatest hits packages and compilations. I can't, you got to remember how young rock and roll is at this point.
Right.
The Beach Boys 15 Big Ones stands for 15 years, 15 years from 61 to 76.
Yeah.
And so it's, I wouldn't say that there's a ton of them out there, and that's why I think that the Beach Boys thing was the first compilation, or at least Endless Summer, to just go crazy like that. And so I don't think anybody else had anything like Endless Summer.
Okay.
And so we get to June, and the Rock and Roll Music single has been released and doing well. June 20th, Brian's birthday, and this year he's 34 years old. Another thing I want to mention, this is the year 1976, okay? It's America nationwide is the 200th birthday, and I still remember we moved from Twin Falls to Blackfoot but I remember that summer, 4th of July, going to the 4th of July thing, and it was massive for the 200. And so this all this Beach Boy stuff is happening around this magical American time too, so it's like the resurgence of the Beach Boys just happened to coincide with America's 200th birthday too, and just all of that definitely contributes to all of the energy going on. But on his birthday, Lorne Michaels, the producer of Saturday Night Live, the guy who started Saturday Night Live at about this time in the 70s. He, I don't know who hired him, but they hired him to do a special on the Beach Boys at about this time. And one of the things that they did on Brian's birthday is they have the famous sketch where Brian, this is the picture of Brian when they took him down to the beach, but John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd dressed up as policemen knock on Brian's door. Marilyn answers the door, and they ask for Brian, and she leads him up to the bedroom. He's in bed, and they say, hey, I'll have to have you watch it, but you're under arrest for not having ever surfed. And so they get him out of bed, and they drag him down to the beach with a surfboard in his bathrobe, and he gets out there and gets in the water.
Okay.
And with Belushi and Aykroyd in their police uniforms in the water with him, and it's just hilarious. But it was, it was a joke because Brian was scared of the water. As a matter of fact, Dr. Landy was there, and he gave Brian a note to put in his bathrobe pocket that says, "You will not die."
Oh, wow.
Or so, so it's,
Yeah, I can relate. I'm not a big fan of the ocean either, so.
Well, and then that night they went to a house. I think it was a house that Carl had rented in Malibu someplace, Trancas Beach. And they had a birthday party for him, and there were a lot of folks there, all the Beach Boys and their families, but Paul and Linda McCartney are there. You can see this was all filmed for that special, but it's on the internet too. And I say juxtapose this with a couple years before when Paul and Linda had come to visit him, and he wouldn't come out of the room. He just stayed in there crying.
Yeah, that's where they heard him crying. That's right.
Right. And so that's all cool footage, and people should check that out. One of the funny stories from that whole deal is when they were having rehearsals for the scene where they drag him down to the beach, Belushi brought a bunch of pizza and a whole bunch of beer, and I guess Dr. Landy wasn't there when they started these rehearsals for this meeting, and Brian had already put down a pizza and about 5 beers before Dr. Landy could ever get. And when he got there and he found out what had been going on, he got pissed, and he sat everybody said, "Listen, Brian's not supposed to be on any of this, and who brought this?" And Belushi kind of sheepishly raises his hand, and he can't have it, and I guess Belushi sat there and took it, and he goes, "I was just trying to be nice,
Yeah.
But that's I love that story.
Yeah,
In the beginning of July, Brian plays the first couple of shows of the Brian is Back campaign, meaning that he not only got in and produced 15 big ones, that they were going to start dragging them out on the road. Not full time, but this is where they first tried to. So
when they kicked off the campaign.
Well,
2 live shows.
15 big ones is going to be released July 5th. So Brian plays 2. It's like on the 3rd and the 4th, or the 2nd and the 3rd, before it gets dropped.
Got it.
But the one at Anaheim Stadium, which I think is on the 3rd. Maybe it's the 4th, but it's 4th of July on 1976, right?
Yeah,
and so here's, and again, footage is out there. You can see Mike introducing. I think they play about 5 tunes, and then they bring Brian on. They introduce him. The crowd goes crazy. Brian plays those shows, but he almost sings nothing and just is like stock still at the piano most of the time, and nobody knows it, but Dr. Landy is just off stage hovering, kind of trying to monitor the whole situation. That concert, considering the other Beach Boys, and I've got a DVD copy of it, it's an amazing concert, and it made me want to recognize some other people from the Beach Boys band that I hadn't got to yet. One is Carly Munoz, who is an amazing keyboard player that had been working with him from I think the late 60s.
Oh, wow.
And he's still with them at this point. And Bobby Figueroa, wonderful percussionist. I can't say enough about these guys, and I feel like they're such a huge part of the live shows in the, especially the 70s. There's also a man named Ron Altbach that comes in about this time and will have some influence on future albums, but also Al's son, Matthew.
Oh, yeah.
On this video, you can see him, and they would let him stay up there for almost the whole show playing the bongos. He's not singing or anything, and he's about 10 years old, a little bit younger than me, but you could see him up there playing right along. And ironically, years later, he becomes one of the only Beach Boy kids. He's still featured in Brian's band. He sings the falsetto parts as well as anybody. And so he was in the 90s, started singing with the Beach Boys officially, and then is still doing it with Brian and Al. And so even as a young kid, he was already up there beating on the drums. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so anyway, that show at Anaheim was huge. Brian's back July 5th. 15 Big Ones gets dropped. Goes to number 8 on Billboard.
Nice.
That whole album goes to number 8. Just amazing, really.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because now we're gonna go ahead and talk about the album.
That is amazing, because this doesn't feel like a number 8 album, from my perspective anyway. And sometimes with these music analysis or album analysis that I do, where I really, like I've said before, I'll listen to it a couple times, and then I'll really, right before the episode, I'll really listen closely and take notes. But there's a lot of times if I don't like a song, or by the time I get to that last listen, I'm like, actually, what, damn, this song, I kind of actually like this song. Where that didn't happen too much. I think it happened maybe once on this album, but I just found that it happened more on other albums. But especially those early 70s ones, where it's just like, oh, song's okay, and then by the end of it, I'm like, oh my god. But like we said, kicks off with rock and roll music, and I wrote down, I was like, is this a cover? Because I felt like I'd heard it before, and so obviously went over that. But what I did write down is, if it is a cover, it's a great Beach Boys cover. Like, this was another one, and I have seen this throughout their, a lot of the covers that they do, where they just pick really good covers that fit with them.
They had a lot of covers that did really well too. So much, and we've talked about it before, that their versions often become what people associate those songs with.
And I wonder if people more associate even this song, maybe not knowing that that it is the Beach Boys, but that they actually, the version that they think of when they think of this song is actually the Beach Boys version. I think that there probably is a lot of that going on. And and I can't, if I put myself back in 1976, at this age, and I'm a Beach Boys fan, if I got this album and it kicked off with this song, I'd be happy. I'd be like, okay, this is looking promising. So, although overall this album wasn't that impressive to me, how it starts actually is, even going into It's Okay. Like, I think this is a good song. And this is an original, yeah?
And this is one that they started in 74. I think it's one of the tracks that they worked up at Garcio's Ranch in Colorado.
Okay.
And it's done in collaboration with a guy from named Roy Wood.
And what is the? I don't have a ton of notes on it, but that I caught myself keep going that, like,
that's Mike doing
that's
that
Mike
line.
I was like walking around my house the other day, just like that can,
it's a dumb vocal part, but it's one of those things that it's a hooky thing,
exactly.
And remember in Long Promised Road, when we were talking about the new documentary a few episodes, notice there's a couple times when Brian says, play It's Okay off 15 Big Ones. And he does a new version of It's Okay on Long Promised Road, but Brian seems to like that tune too.
Okay, and he wrote that one?
Him and Mike
wrote that one. And then Had to Phone You. So when I was listening to Spring, is this on Spring?
That's so funny.
Or was this because I didn't know if this was, how I had the YouTube kind of weird YouTube version playlist I was listening to? But this is actually on Spring.
It wasn't on the Spring album.
It was on the Spring.
It was I think a B-side of a single, I think.
Okay.
It's the same tune, but Brian re-recorded the track. meaning that they didn't. Sometimes they just use the original Spring and then put new vocals on it, but they actually redid it for this. And this is where I gotta interject just a little bit. I was gonna kind of wait until I got 15 Big Ones, but all during this, I'm hyper aware of the Beach Boys now, and I would see this record in there, but for some reason my mom wasn't getting it for me right off the bat, and everything. And I'd look at the back and I'd look at those albums. I remember Hadophonia specifically. People don't know what it was like back then. You had no idea. You couldn't go to the internet and see what that song sounded like or anything. And I literally would go to the record Grand Central in Blackfoot or Pocatello, Idaho, and look at the back of that and those album or the song titles. And I remember seeing Hadophonia and making what Hadophonia. I'd make up in my mind. I'd read the song titles because there was no chance of me even knowing until I got it. But I was so chomping at the bit that I was like imagining in my mind what these songs must sound like. But anyway, keep going.
Well, and who's singing on this?
It's rotated between, I think, all the Beach Boys.
Oh, okay. Do you know who's doing the outro? Do you remember that?
The real scratchy one?
Yeah,
that's Brian.
On. That is, okay, I thought
Brian.
so.
And the shocking thing about this album for most people is what has happened to Brian's voice since 1973.
I actually have that. I don't know what song.
Chapel of Love is after Hadophonia, and it's really evident there.
So, and the thing about... the next song is...
and we did say Hadophonia. Hadophonia is an original.
Yes, that's
so
original.
It's Okay and Hadophonia, original tunes, and two of my favorites,
But it was recorded before with Spring. With Spring. Okay, it was. Yep. But it wasn't on the album proper, or it was?
No, it was not. It was it was the B-side of a single, I believe.
Okay. So then, so going to the what is it? Chapel
of Love, which is another oldie.
Yeah, and what's funny is that I don't like this original. I don't like their version either. Like I've never liked this song. This is the first time I've heard them do it, so I did listen to it, all the way through. But I didn't like the song in the first place, so their version didn't really change that for me.
Right. So this was originally, we've talked about how Brian was a huge Phil Spector fan in the early '60s, and this was one of the early '60s Phil Spector girl group tunes that that's why it gets on here.
Yeah, one that this kind of goes against what I said about rock and roll music, where that was a very fitting song. Where they did this, I'm like, that's weird that they chose to do this, but with that explanation, I guess that makes sense. So then, Everybody's in Love with You. This is a very pretty song. This is a very pretty song. And
it is. I've thought about it for our cover.
To do a cover?
Yeah, because it's so pretty, and people seem to like the prettier tunes.
Yeah, like
I
Disney
do
Girls.
Yeah. But I decided on another one because it just turned out better. But this is Mike.
Mike's song.
The writer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this song
and I've loved it when I first got 15 Big Ones, and hats off to him again. I mean, I think he had a lot to do with the music, just like the song Big Sur, just unexpectedly kind of came out of nowhere.
Well, and there's the music specifically, like you take, if you like kind of zone out on the vocals, like the music itself, that's what I kept especially on my last run through. I actually listened to it again, where I was just like trying to because it's just that flute in the background. Is that
which I think is probably Charles Lloyd again.
Okay, I was going to ask if that was the same.
Might be another one of the Wrecking Crew guys, but
there was no epic solo, but so I didn't know.
Now Daryl Dragon, I don't think he was still a part of, because this is when the Captain and Tennille had their great big success, and they had a TV show. But I remember seeing on the back of 15 Big Ones here that Toni Tennille, his wife, so the Captain and Tennille, the Tennille part of that, she's singing background vocals on Everyone's in Love with You.
Yeah.
And you can hear her pretty prominently.
Well, and actually, now that you just kind of pointed to it, and I do want to talk about it, is the covers kind of, this cover's just kind of like it just doesn't really, because that cover that's up there, that's the original, right? With the photos on it.
Yeah, and I've got my original 1976.
It just is kind of like, it doesn't really. I mean, you go from the really cool artwork from the early 70s to even the cool artwork during the compilation period to this like photo.
Right, and
Olympic
so I was kind of
rings, I don't
wanting
know.
to talk about. I was thinking maybe we get to the end and talk about the artwork a little bit more. But this is when Dean Torrance of Jan and Dean designed the famous Beach Boy logo.
Oh, so
And
this is
if
the first time we see this.
Yes,
Okay.
and also if you look at it, the outside borders of it, it kind of resembles a jukebox of that time. This is kind of on the nostalgia thing that were kind of the design of this, and then these what people call the Olympic rings.
Yeah.
It's all another kind of Americana thing, trying to tie the Beach Boys into that. And there also hadn't been a album cover in a while that featured their pictures on it.
Oh, okay.
But it is very, very strange when but in the 3 years that happened since Holland, I mean, a lot of strange things that went on in the it was
true.
radically different in Beach Boy world.
Yeah.
Okay,
so then this next one is, I don't know if this is a cover either. This is like I can't even read my own handwriting. Cool. Talk to Me. Tallahassee
it's
Lassie.
actually 2 covers that Brian puts together as a medley that just seems like the craziest structure. It's a song called Talk to Me, and in the middle of it they go to a snippet of a tune called Tallahassee Lassie.
Oh, okay. And you know what I wrote down? I said I that change in there. I was like, is that like a key change, or like, because it just
it's a whole song
it's
change.
a whole song change. That makes sense to me. I was like I think there's a distinct key change in here, but I didn't. I thought that part.
Tempo.
I thought that tempo. I thought that that part was interesting, but other than that, this is actually where the album kind of changes for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it kind of goes from, I'm like, I don't know. It starts to go downhill for me from this point on. Not that there's not good moments, but
right.
Like I said, if I was listening, when I listened to it, it's like, oh, this is good. Oh, this is decent. And then it just kind of starts to taper off from there.
Right.
So, that same song.
Right. And that's our cover for this.
That's the cover for this one, which I haven't seen. I mean, I'm sorry, which we
we'll
haven't
do
done
that
yet.
after this.
We haven't done yet.
Episode.
And so
I haven't done it either, but
yeah.
I got
my
idea.
You got it in your head. So this is Brian singing.
Yes, and it's Brian's tune.
And this is where, because I wasn't sure if Brian was singing on that outro for Hadophonia, but this is where, when I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's Brian. This is where I feel like it's like you said, wow, the voice.
Mm-hmm.
You can really start to hear his age, I guess, right?
No, he's only 34 years old. It's cigarettes and cocaine.
Oh, it's
it just started
the abuse.
Alcohol.
Yeah, and I didn't like, and this is why I'm wondering if I'm gonna like your version of this song, because I really, really dislike the lyrics of this song, and so.
And they're
but
mainly
actually
all Brian's, and it's supposed to be just it's just a super abbreviated history of music. Talking about because music, our system of music started with the Gregorian chants, monks doing that in about the 1300s, and I mean it's so sparse and so little there that it's hard to, but it's just kind of showing hey, we're still singing that same song that people figured this out a long time ago.
Yeah, well, and this is like when I tune out the lyrics, I actually like the song. So the lyrics actually ruin the song for me a little bit, where I'm like, oh my God, I wish, stop. So I'm curious on if your version, if I'll enjoy it better, because, your lyrics are not there on the violin.
Right. And the background singing on this is primarily Marilyn and Diane.
Right. Which actually,
Spring.
Yeah.
You can kind of hear the women's voices on that. Yeah.
But yeah, that was pretty much it. I'm excited to hear the.
Yeah, and then the end of side 1 should be the what they call the TM song, their second song that they've actually titled after, or I think the first Transcendental Meditation that was on Friends was actually called Transcendental Meditation. This is called the TM song.
Right.
Starts with that fight.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of closer to really what the Beach Boys were like, right? It captures, I'm sure most people think it was staged and meant to be funny, which it was. But I mean, the way
Is it
they
not
were
staged?
yelling. Oh, it is staged.
Oh.
But I mean, that's more of how they felt about each other at this time
point,
anyway.
yeah. The music is okay on this one for me. God, but just again, the lyrics, I'm just like, the lyrics started to, the last song, this song, that just really started to I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out exactly like what my like rub is with these things where it's like, like it's
just because they number one, Dr. Landy was influenced, and even though he didn't get credit on some of these things, he was, I think, even at this point, and for sure on Love You, he was helping with lyrics, and he was terrible lyric. His ideas are always horrible. And he had his girlfriend helping out.
Like the simplest,
but I don't
basic.
Brian could come up with pretty simple, basic lyrics himself when he wasn't. It might be something a little bit out of the ordinary form, where he just doesn't want to try that hard.
Well, it's I'm thinking about Surf's Up, and I'm like, what in the hell does that mean? Or all this is that, and like trying to figure out like, where you have this amazing music, and then these lyrics that you have to just, the depth of these lyrics, and then you come over to this stuff, and even TM, that's, essentially a deep concept, is this lyrical, like, just like kind of elementary lyrical style. So, this is, like I said, this is just where things just really go meh for me. Right. Just like a big meh, like the music's kind of cool, but not all that in. And then
now we got side 2.
Okay, so side 2 kicks off, and this is what, Palisades Park.
This is another cover.
Is a cover? I was wondering, because it actually sounds like it's from a different era.
Yeah, it's from I think the late 50s or maybe early 60s. But most people that grew up in the 70s or were around know a show called The Gong Show.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember hearing
probably
about
seen some reruns of it, or maybe. But a guy named Chuck Barris did The Gong Show. He was the MC, and he wrote this song.
Oh,
and a guy named Freddie Cannon had a hit with it.
And so was the Beach Boys version very different, or was it pretty close to the original?
It's pretty close.
Because I think there's a cool like synthy sound that he does. It kind of makes it sound like a carnival almost.
Well, and that's to me, he's reprising the way he uses the organ in Amusement Parks USA from Summer Days and Summer Nights. It's kind of, but yeah. And then there's some good guitar work on it. I like the. I feel like it's a fairly rockin' little track.
Yeah, and I liked it. I even wrote, I was like, this sounds like something from the 50s or 60s. Mm-hmm. And so that I was on this one. I like this one too. I even wrote that. I was like, I like this one. It's nothing that's like I'm gonna skip, but I like this one. And then Susie Cincinnati. That's and so the first thing,
big favorite of mine.
Yeah, and so this guitar riff on it reminded me of another guitar riff that they have. Would it be close to like Dance Dance Dance, or
maybe some of the movement. I think you might have heard Susie Cincinnati before. Yeah, because this is, and even the track, I'm sure some of the vocals date back to Sunflower, because it was originally on Sunflower, and then when Sunflower was rejected, it was left off. So Susie Cincinnati was an owl tune from way back in 1970 that finally got on 15 Big Ones.
Yeah, I love the riff. I was just curious on if it was something that, it reminded me of a Beach Boys riff. I figured for sure it was a Brian tune, but because it's actually got a really cool key change in it, and the structure of it is pretty unique for a little rocker. It's Al's little punk tune, man. Yeah, no, it's cool. And then we go to a casual look, and I really don't have anything to say about this one.
Another cover.
Oh, okay, another cover.
Yeah.
They're just not really. There's just nothing that was just nothing.
Pretty flaccid.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So we'll just move right on then. Blueberry Hill. I did like this one.
And this is a cover.
And I didn't like it at first, but it kind of grew on me. And I never heard this before, so I didn't know this was a cover.
Yeah, this is a Fats Domino tune from the 50s. It was a big hit in the 1950s. And I like their version. It's funny, there was so much going on in Beach Boy world this time that I remember a story about Brian working on the track for this, and Stan, Mike's brother, said something to Brian, said, "Oh, are you gonna have Dennis sing this or instead of Mike? Because maybe Mike." And Brian said, "Why?" And well, because you said Dennis has a raspier voice. Oh, is this what it is? It's the Loves Against the Wilsons, and I can't. He was kind of,
interesting.
Even though Stan, his cousin, was suggesting that or reminding him that he had said, "I think my brother would sound good on this," rather than my cousin, who's already sang the lead or whatever. It just kind of little stories like that. It was, they were fighting over who would get leads.
Right.
Who would get songs on the albums.
Yeah.
That was happening as early as like Surf's Up,
Oh, really?
Where they would, Carl and Dennis would get into arguments about which tunes were going to make the record and what the sequencing was going to be. But basically Blueberry Hill, and then what does it go into after that?
Back Home.
Back Home. Another early tune. This was written originally in the early 60s with one of Brian's buddies. And they changed it quite a bit and it's a new recording of it. They did some work on it during the Sunflower. Another one that was on Sunflower and got left off finally shows up on 15 Big Ones. But this is a complete new recording and actually a new structure for the tune.
Yeah, just kind of along the same lines, like not terrible, but I'm not going to probably put it on, you know what I mean? Like I'm not going to go out of my way to listen to that one. In the Still of the Night, unlike Chapel of Love, that I disliked that song originally and I disliked the cover, I love In the Still of the Night originally, and I love this cover of In the Still of the Night. I mean, it was fantastic cover of this song.
I love it because I'll read where people say it's Dennis singing it and the lead, and they'll say Dennis's voice or raspy lead is flat, and it's not flat. It's not out of tune. It's a little understated, and that juxtaposed with Brian reaching for the falsetto, and it's broken, right? But he's singing all the high stuff. Brian is, but this is his new voice where he can't really. And so to me, this one and the next one, Just Once in My Life, which is kind of a duet with Brian and Carl, another cover. But this is like, there's a lot of emotional things to me about the last couple of songs on the record, just because of it's showing, here's the new Beach Boys, and Brian's broken.
Yeah.
Or he's changed.
Yeah, you can definitely.
But
tell.
I love I think it's on my. This is on my favorites. This and Just Once in My Life. I mean, when I have any favorites list of the Beach Boys will include. They have such emotional.
Okay, so talk to me about Just in My Life, because I was not a fan. Just Once in My Life. Yeah, because I was not a fan of that, and that's how the record ends. And so I was not. That one, I didn't like the droney, organy, synthy, whatever that is, sound that's going on. And once again, the lyrics are not good. But normally on these other songs, I can listen past the lyrics and be like, oh, there's actually some really good music going on. But this one, I'm not to say that there's not music going on, but it just didn't hit me in a way that resonated with me at all.
This is another cover. This is the Righteous Brothers.
Okay.
Same guys that did You Lost That Lovin' Feelin'. Around the same time.
Okay.
And this was another big hit for them. It was written by Jeff Berry and Ellie Greenwich. I don't know how you say your name, but then Phil Spector was involved too. And so it had always been a favorite of Brian's, and it's the versions are pretty similar. This version's pretty similar to the original, but I can also understand why somebody wouldn't like it. There's kind of some inside things going on with the music that make me resonate with it.
Yeah,
I also like the juxtaposition of Carl's voice on the verses, and when it comes in Brian on the chorus, people say his new ropey voice. Just.
So what other from musician standpoint, is there anything that
the chords?
There's the chords.
Yeah,
that are being
and
used.
the way Brian voices all that stuff on this particular cover of it, to me, it's another thing. He's doing a lot of the synth work on it, and he's reinforcing the parts that he likes about the original record, which is another kind of a aspect that interests me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, kind of overall for me and this album is a couple things. Obviously the lyrical, the lyrics that are just, subpar, and then just not a lot of, even like with Carl and the Passions, it wasn't like I loved the entire album of Carl and Passions, but Here She Comes and All This Is That, like I will go to Carl and Passions just to listen to those songs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll go right to those songs, and then I'll listen to them 3 or 4 times in a row, just because I love those songs so much since I've discovered them. There's not really a song that does that to me. There's no like song that just like stands out. And even on Surf's Up, like I go to Surf's Up and I need to listen to Surf's Up to that song's in my head right now. They're just, for me, there's just nothing like that on this one. But it went to number 8.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is that just,
well, that was just on the strength of
momentum, right?
Of everything that 2 years before that and all of the hype. I mean, the Brian's Back thing worked, even if it wasn't necessarily true.
But, so, it went to number 8, it went to number 8 and also was like loved, but like what is the
the critics most of the Timothy White, who was a really, he wrote a great book on the Beach Boys called The Nearest Faraway Place later on, but he was a great journalist at the time, and he had been interviewing Brian and the boys before it came out, and he had heard some songs that he thought were going to be on the album that didn't end up being on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And then the album comes out and it's a bunch of oldies, and I've read his review. He says, wow, it's something like this. He says, I've been waiting, we've all been waiting for this new Beach Boys record to come out, and now it's out, and I feel like I've got a bad sunburn.
Oh.
Kind of talking about the difference in Brian's voice and all the oldies, and then talking to Carl and Dennis in those interviews, and they're saying, yeah, we wanted Brian to do about half and half, and we got mostly oldies and stuff that was kind of half-baked.
Yeah, that is a great description of it.
It didn't sound like it was finished. I guess they had to sneak into the studio. No, I don't know how much sneaking they had to do because he didn't really care, but they had to go in and sweeten things after he was saying I'm done with this particular tune or whatever,
Okay, so I mean, this comes out, we're only halfway through the year at this point, right? We're in July, the beginning of July.
Yeah, but the rest of it happens pretty quickly.
All right, well,
that's the big thing. I do want to talk about my cousins really quick. My heart's cousins, Uncle Sam's kids, my dad's sister, Aunt Claire Joe's kids, the Jones cousins is what I would call them, and then some other cousins from my dad's side of the family, the Woker scenes, and we won't get into that any more than that, except for right about this time, they all of those cousins that I just mentioned, they knew how much I and John, too, loved the Beach Boys, and we were already performing Beach Boys songs at every family gathering, so they were hip to, and I remember Sherry, who listens to our podcast religiously, and I want to, yes, thank you, Sherry, I love you. She's the oldest of Aunt Claire Joe's kids, but her and her just younger sister Terry had been to a Beach Boys concert. They were living in San Jose, California at the time, and they had been to a concert in like 75 or something like that. And I remember we were still living in Twin Falls. They came to visit us that summer, and they had pictures of them being at the Beach Boy. And I still remember sitting at the table and them showing the pictures that they took at that concert. And I just, oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah.
And then later on, that's actually is in 76. We were over at the Woker Scene's house, and the older girls, Kathy, Betsy, and Maria, either 2 or 3 all 3 of them, they had gone to a Beach Boys concert, and they came back with this for me. And this is the 1976 15 Big Ones concert program that they brought back for me, that if you look at, you can see where I cut all the pictures out of it and hung it on my bedroom wall.
Concert program. So you'd go to a concert and
you
get
get programs.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll see lots of programs from me going to, but anyway, they brought this. This was just mind-blowing for me back then.
The fact of there being concert programs is mind blowing for me right now. Like I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. And I've got them from.
What a cool collectible thing to have.
Yeah, and then I've also got this. I would talk a little bit. This is an
8-track.
Nice. Lots of people had 8 tracks in 1976, and then this book. This doesn't look like much, but this came out in 76, and this is the first thing of any significance in print. And this is called The Beach Boys, the Southern California Pastoral. It's by Bruce Golden. He was a music historian, but it was the first time anything had come out in book form.
Oh, okay.
About the Beach Boys, and so that's interesting. And I lucked into a copy of that.
And that was this year. This in 76. Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So anyway, I just did want to mention the cousins and how it wasn't just my energy, as everybody in my family knew, and they would shower me with Beach Boys stuff and have continued to this day.
I mean, we're doing a Beach Boys podcast right now, so it makes sense,
So anyway, had that going on. On August 5th, exactly, the It's Okay, and at least that's what it was called when I was seeing the advertisement, the TV special that Lorne Michaels had been hired to do with Saturday Night Live. It came out and it was going to air, and I remember I knew it was going to be on, and I was waiting with bated breath. And I think the morning of the show was going to be, our power went out at our house in Twin Falls, and I was beside myself. And so Mom and Dad called our family friends the Pettingers, and we went out to their house, and they had a great big living room and a brand new TV, and I still remember just sitting in front of that thing just glued. And there's a lot of footage from them at that Anaheim concert, and I still remember Dean Pettinger, my folks' friend and the dad of that family. Carl was singing, I think probably God Only Knows, but he's so close to them. He goes, "What? He looked like he's eating that microphone." I can remember that vividly, right? But all the stuff with Brian in bed and getting drug out to go surfing, I mean, I was just like, because I'm 6'7", I'm really getting to the age where, and had enough backstory to where it's all coming together for me, right? And so that special was huge and still is, and that can be found. I've got a DVD of it, and it's just called The Beach Boys, an American Band. No, that's a different documentary. I'll have to look and see what that's called. But anyway, it was sponsored by Dr. Pepper. I still remember that.
Nice.
Look up Beach Boys It's Okay TV special. At the end of August, they released the second single from 15 Big Ones, which is It's Okay.
Oh, okay.
And it goes like top 30.
Nice.
So they're good performance out of everything. September, Dennis starts doing the lion's share of work that will become his 1977's Pacific Ocean Blue album, which that's going to be a huge part of the next episode.
So that's homework.
But he starts doing a lot of work for that. The other thing that happened in September, and I remember this vividly also, Brian was asked to be a presenter at the Don Kirshner's Rock Music Awards. It's like just any other big award show type deal, right? And he announced winners of some categories. But at the very end, they had a deal where they were nominating people for there was no Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at the time, but they said it was the Hall of Fame. And they were nominating the Beach Boys, the Beatles, Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan. I can't remember. It's a pretty good company.
Yeah,
right,
definitely.
Right. Well, anyway, the Beatles ended up winning. I'm only 6 years old. I have one Beatles single. It's Hey Jude.
Uh-huh.
I remember the Apple label and everything, and I remember when they won, and I remember it showing Brian. I think he was sitting with Carl and Dennis, and they're in tuxedos, and they no expression, but I was so disheartened. And I remember I went upstairs to my bedroom and I broke that 45.5 of the Beatles, Hey Jude,
your
and threw it in the garbage.
Oh, a little 6-year-old's emotional reaction.
After that, I didn't even know who the Beatles were at that time. All I knew is they beat the Beach Boys.
They beat your guy, yeah.
They beat my guy, yeah. And obviously, subsequently became a huge Beatles fan. But that's what I did in that moment.
Yeah. Back then, you.
So that's kind of funny. In October, the Beach Boys and Brian with Dr. Landy around all the time start work on what would become their next year's Love You album, which is a really important album. November, Rolling Stone publishes another big story. It's a cover story, and it uses the famous picture from him going surfing at the beach with the bathrobe.
That's what that is?
Yes, that's actually the picture that's on the cover of Rolling Stone. And the article was called The Healing of Brother Bry. And it was another one of those kind of things where people were going, oh, that's cool. And then they hear about some of the stuff, ooh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Wow, and so, more of the story getting out there and more publicity. Also in November, we had moved from Twin Falls to Blackfoot, Idaho at this point. And the reason I know is Brian was on the Mike Douglas TV show. It was a talk show. And Mom knew it was coming on. And I got to stay home from school, and she got our old school movie camera out and filmed the TV show. And I still have the footage on a VCR of her filming the TV, watching me watch Brian play Sloop John B. And I think he did Back Home so I know that we lived in Blackfoot because I know what I was doing when he was on the Mike Douglas show. And also in the end of that month, Brian, not all of the Beach Boys, and they were kind of pissed about this, gets asked to be on Saturday Night Live as the musical guest. And
just Brian.
Just Brian, not
Interesting.
The rest. Yeah, and he does Good Vibrations by himself with a piano set in a little sandbox to kind of, and he also does Love Is a Woman, which is from the next year's Love You album, but none of it is very good.
Oh yeah, I was just about to ask.
People feel like he was almost not trying on purpose.
Yeah, well, sometimes with SNL, like even you get a favorite actor or favorite celebrity or musician on there, and then they get on there. It's kind of cringy. Like you're kind of like, oh, like that's. Like you kind of almost feel like embarrassed for them.
Well, I think in this case it was even that. You can, all that footage is out there and you can see that too, and you go take a look at Brian on Saturday Night Live, and it was just not the greatest moment in the world. But it was, again, back to this thing of no publicity is bad publicity.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing was, just adding to all of the other amazing stuff that was going on for them. Let's get to the end of the year. Steve Love fires Dr. Landy. There's a lot of reasons, but one of the biggies is it's starting to cost $10,000 a month for the Beach Boys to have
outrageous.
Brian to have a therapist. And so, after getting Brian out of bed and getting some things going, Dr. Landy's going away, which is going to kind of foreshadow Brian going back into a decline after this.
Oh, okay.
But I got 15 big ones finally for Christmas in December.
Okay, so
and I think so. That's what Mom was doing, is holding out to give me this thing.
Christmas.
I knew it was out, man. I'm watching all these TV shows and everything. I see it in the stores and everything, and I'm still not understanding why I can't have it.
Yeah. Little 6-year-old self. How what do you expect?
So I remember this. It's so funny. I'm gonna grab this again real quick. Try to knock over the program, but this gatefold in here is so cool, and I just could. It's so many different pictures from different eras. Like it says Carl going into Marcella, Denver Coliseum. I had never even heard Marcella. I didn't know who Marcella was or what he was going into, or what, but I just loved the picture. All of this stuff was just really cool. And then I want you to see the actual vinyl. See these marks on here?
Yeah.
I had gotten, for Christmas that year, I also got a set of finger paints.
Oh.
And so while I'm listening to this album, I accidentally got a little bit of finger paint on the record. So I finally got it after all that waiting for Christmas, and it was momentous, and it's probably a reason that I like a lot of the song. It just happened for me at a pretty magical time. Even though it's not their best work, some of the stuff lives with me for a long time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
New Year's Eve, want to mention this, they played the LA Forum. Huge that might have been the first of several years in a row they play a big New Year's Eve concert.
Well, and that's what I was just about to say, and it was the year prior that they did, or was it
Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve, but that was a TV show. I think that starting this year, 76, they at least for the next few years they do an annual New Year's Eve concert.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they did this at the LA Forum, the great big basketball arena, and it was well received. It was when Brian started wearing his fancy bathrobe on stage, just as almost a parody of what people thought he'd been doing the past few years. And
right.
So that's the reason for that.
And kind of, sorry, going back a little bit, but from the release of 15 Big Ones till now, they have been doing some shows as well.
Oh yes,
and Brian,
I should have said.
And Brian's part of that.
Involved with part of. Yes, there's some. The Capitol Center in Maryland. I know he was on those shows. I think he was on quite a few shows.
Okay,
but not all of them.
Not all of them.
But starting in 77, he's on the road a lot. The end of 76 and getting into 77 is when things start to get really tense within the Beach Boys and the Meditators and the partiers.
Talking about.
And in 77, the Beach Boys almost
break up.
away.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
okay,
because
we'll have to get
of
into
all of those differences. So there you go, folks. 1976. I hope it wasn't too painful.
No, that was a good one. I was, it's funny now that I'm learning more and I have a little more background on them. I'm curious, like when you start saying things like, wait, no, hold on, I want to know a little more of the details. But so for 77, I need to listen to Love You.
And Dennis's Pacific Ocean Blue.
Okay, and that's my homework for this next week. Well, and then if that wraps up 76, I think then we're good for this episode.
Let's go do that same song.
Yeah, so we're going to go record that same song, which you will listen to right after this, the full version. And thank you, as always, for listening. Happy 60th to the Beach Boys once again.
Yes.
And we will see you in the next episode.